Welcome to our video on multiplying and dividing rational numbers. As we go through this lesson, I need you to keep in mind the rules that we learned when we multiplied and divided integers. And the rules that we determined at that time was that when I multiply two numbers or divide two numbers that have the same signs, so either both of those numbers are negative or both are positive, the answer has a positive value. If I multiply or divide two numbers and the numbers have different signs, so one is positive and one is negative, the answer will be negative. And these rules that we applied are going to also work when I multiply or divide with fractions or decimals. So if you do not already have these rules memorized, please take a moment, pause the video, and write them down in your notebook so that you have them. We're going to go through a couple examples. I'm going to start off with some fraction problems. So if I was to multiply the problem, negative 2/3 times negative 1/2. And you're going to notice in this problem I'm going to use parentheses as a multiplication sign. So negative 2/3 times negative 1/2. Please remember, when you multiply fractions, you can cross cancel, and that makes the problem a little bit easier, and it lets us have less simplifying to do at the very end. So if I look at this problem, I see here I have a 2 and a 2, and I know that both of those can be divided by 2 and become 1s. So I'm going to start there with my cross canceling. If I look the other way diagonally, there's nothing that I can take out of 3 and 1, so I'm not going to be able to cross cancel anything further. I'm going to look at the signs of my question, and I see here I have a negative times a negative, so I know my answer will be positive. I'm going to multiply the numerators. 1 times 1 is 1, and then I multiply the denominators. 3 times 1 is 3. So my answer would be positive 1/3. Sometimes I'll have a problem that includes more than two fractions. So for example, I can multiply negative 3/4 times negative 4/7 times negative 2/3. And I want you to keep in mind the rule we talked about during class. I could actually look at my problem and, based on the number of negative signs I see, determine whether my answer will have a positive or a negative value. And I'm going to come over to the side and jot that rule down in case you forgot. So if I look at my problem and I see that there are an even number of negative signs, then I know my answer will be positive. And the reason for that is that each of the negative signs pairs off with another negative sign. If I have an odd number of negative signs, such as the problem here, then I know that my answer is going to be negative. And this makes sense because if I look here, a negative times a negative, these would become positive. And I'm going to take that positive solution and multiply it by another negative. So I'm going to start off here, and I'm just going to work my way left to right. I'm going to start with these first two fractions, and just like before, I can cross cancel, so I could divide the 4 and the 4 and make them both 1s. A negative 3 times a negative 1 gives me a positive 3. A 1 times a 7 gives me a 7. And I'm then going to bring down that last fraction, and I'm going to multiply my answer, 3/7, times negative 2/3. And now I know that I'm multiplying a negative times a positive. Those are different signs, so my answer is going to have a negative value. I know that I can cross cancel the 3 and the 3 and make both of them 1s. And I'm going to multiply normally. So if I multiply the numerators, 1 times 2 is 2, and 7 times 1 is 7. So my solution to this problem would be -2/7. When I divide rational numbers or fractions, I follow the same rules. So I might have a problem such as 14 divided by -7. And I'm going to write my division as a fraction. 14 divided by -7, those are different signs. My answer will be negative. And 14 divided by 7 is 2. I could also write it out with the normal old division sign. So this problem is -40 divided by -8. This time I see that I have two numbers with the same signs. I'm dividing a negative by a negative. So my solution is going to be positive. 40 divided by 8 is 5. One last topic for this video are called complex fractions. And a complex fraction is basically a fraction within a fraction. So if I look, and it looks a lot scarier than it really is, but if I look, I could have something such as this, 1/5 in the numerator, and then my denominator is also going to be a fraction, -3/4. So we have a fraction with two smaller fractions inside of it. Here's the trick to complex fractions. We have to keep in mind that this fraction bar is another way of talking about division. So another way of reading this complex fraction is the numerator divided by the denominator. So I'm going to write it out so that it looks more like we would typically see. 1/5 divided by -3/4. And if you think back to your rules for dividing fractions, we change every division problem into a multiplication problem with keep, switch, flip. So I keep the 1/5, I switch my sign to multiplication, and I flip, or I find the reciprocal of my second fraction. And it's really important here when I find the reciprocal of -3/4 that I don't forget about that negative sign. And now I have a normal multiplication problem. There's nothing here that can be cross-canceled. So I'm going to look at my signs. A negative times a positive is a negative. 1 times 4 is 4. And 5 times 3 is 15. And -4/15 is fully simplified. So that will be my final answer.